My name is Marcus Wright, and for 12 years I believed loyalty was the ultimate currency. I thought if I poured enough of myself, my sweat, my time, my very soul into someone else's dream, it would eventually become my own. I was a fool. Loyalty isn't a currency. It's an invisible contract, written in promises that can be erased in a single moment by the one person you never thought would break them. The day I realized this was the day the company I saved from ruin posted its highest quarterly profit in history. The air was thick with celebration, but the champagne tasted like ash in my mouth. I stood there, watching my mentor, Arthur, the man I'd have walked through fire for, as he looked past a decade of my sacrifice and saw only his daughter. He was about to hand her the keys to the kingdom I built, and he expected me to thank him for the privilege. He smiled at me, a practiced paternal smile, and asked if I was ready to train my replacement. In that moment, the contract vanished, and all that was left was the cold, hard truth. I smiled back, a genuine smile for the first time in months, and told him I was there to resign. The shock on his face was the first brick in the foundation of my new life. Have you ever given everything to a person or a job, believing your loyalty would be your shield, only to find it was the very thing they used to betray you? That feeling, that deep, gut-wrenching realization that you were just a chapter in someone else's story, it's a unique kind of pain. If you know that pain, share your story in the comments below. You're not alone. My story with Arthur Wright didn't start in a corner office. It started in the mud. 12 years ago, his company, Wright and Sons, was a punchline in the local construction industry. The Sons were long gone, and Arthur was a proud man watching his father's legacy disintegrate under a mountain of debt and disrepair. I was 25, my own small handyman business, a casualty of the recession, my tools and my only remaining assets. I showed up at his dusty, disorganized site, looking for any work he could throw my way. He saw something in me that day, not just the calluses on my hands, but the determination in my eyes. He gave me a chance when no one else would, and I swore I would repay that debt 1,000 times over. I started as a grunt, but I worked like the company was my own. I was the first to arrive and the last to leave. While others complained about the heat, I was studying blueprints by the light of a dying work lamp. I wasn't just fixing leaks and framing walls. I was learning the anatomy of a business in its death throes, and I was determined to be its doctor. Within 6 months, I was running a crew. Within 2 years, I was managing projects. Arthur saw my value and gave me more responsibility, and I delivered every single time. I brought us into the digital age, implementing project management software that brought order to our chaos. I built relationships with architects and suppliers based on integrity, not just the lowest bid. I turned Wright and Sons into Wright Solutions, a name that reflected the modern, problem-solving company we had become. We grew from a struggling 5-man crew to a thriving operation with 30 employees and multi-million-dollar commercial contracts. For me, it was never just a job, it was my life's work. I miss family dinners, anniversaries, and my daughter's first steps because I was at the office, fighting for a future I truly believed we shared. Arthur would often find me there late at night, surrounded by blueprints. "When the time is right, Marcus," he'd say, his voice full of warmth, "you'll get what you deserve. You're the son I never had." I believed him. I clung to those words through every exhausting day. My wife, Nina, would voice her doubts over coffee at 5 a.m. before another 16-hour day. "You've earned a partnership 10 times over," she'd say, her eyes filled with a concern I refused to acknowledge. "Why hasn't he made it official?" My answer was always the same, a mantra I repeated until I brainwashed myself with it. "I trust Arthur. He's been good to me. When the time is right, it will happen." The first crack in that unwavering faith appeared when Chloe graduated and came home. Arthur's daughter had always been a specter in the background, the college kid who showed up on summer breaks more interested in her phone than in the work that paid her tuition. She returned at 28, armed with an MBA her father had paid for, wearing crisp, expensive suits, and carrying a sense of entitlement that preceded her like a bad smell. She didn't see a company I had resuscitated. She saw an inheritance she was now qualified to manage. She had ideas, reckless and flashy, straight from a textbook and completely divorced from the reality of construction. We need to streamline, she'd announce in meetings, dismissing the robust systems I had spent years perfecting. Outsource, cut costs, promise faster turnarounds. She talked about people and projects as if they were just numbers on a spreadsheet, variables to be manipulated for a better bottom line. I tried to guide her, to explain the nuances, the why behind the way we did things. But my experience was seen as resistance. My caution was labeled as a lack of vision. Arthur watched her with a proud, almost desperate gleam in his eye. He was making up for a lifetime of absence, and his guilt was a blindfold he willingly wore. The stage was set for my undoing, and I was the only one who didn't see the curtains about to close. The dismantling of my life's work began not with a bang, but with 1,000 small, calculated cuts. It started with the subcontractors. Chloe decided to renegotiate all our contracts, squeezing our most trusted partners on price. She bragged about saving a few $1,000s, blind to the fact that these men and women had stood by us through lean times, their reliability and quality worth far more than the petty cash she saved. When our head carpenter, a man who had been with Arthur for 20 years, pushed back, she fired him, just like that. She replaced him with the lowest bidder, a crew whose work was so shoddy it failed the first inspection, costing us 2 weeks and thousands in rework. Then came the software. She decided the system I had implemented was too expensive and not agile enough. She replaced it with a cheap cloud-based app that was constantly crashing, losing data, and creating chaos across every active project site. The project timelines I had meticulously built, which accounted for weather, permits, and human error, were thrown out. She imposed her own impossibly tight schedules, promising clients we could build in half the time. When I confronted her, she smiled that condescending MBA smile and told me I was too attached to the old way of doing things. The first major client we lost was a gut punch. It was the Morrison Center, a project I had personally fought to win. In a meeting with the developers, Chloe contradicted my carefully calculated timeline in front of everyone, promising to finish the project 6 weeks faster. I saw the doubt flash in the client's eyes. They didn't want flashy promises. They wanted realistic, dependable execution. They walked away, citing concerns about unrealistic expectations. I bit my tongue until it bled, trying to preserve the company's dignity, but inside I was screaming. I went to Arthur, my folder brimming with reports that detailed the delays, the cost overruns, the client complaints. I laid it all on his desk, a testament to the disaster unfolding under his watch. Arthur, we need to talk about Chloe's decisions, I said, my voice tight with a frustration I could no longer contain. She's costing us clients. The Morrison Center walked. We can't keep doing this. He barely glanced at the papers. He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression hardening in a way I'd never seen before. Marcus, you've grown too cautious, he said, and the words felt like a physical blow. That's the problem. Success has made you conservative. Chloe brings fresh ideas, fresh energy. She's the future of this company. Fresh energy, the future. My 12 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication were being dismissed as a liability. I was no longer the backbone. I was the old guard, holding back progress. The true, undeniable betrayal came at the company Christmas party. I was mingling with employees and longtime clients, the very fabric of the company I loved, when I overheard Arthur laughing with a group of investors. Chloe's got the vision, he said, raising his glass. She's the future. Marcus is a great foreman, but he doesn't understand modern business practices the way she does. A client who had trusted me for years protested, praising my reliability, but Arthur waved him off. The words weren't just a dismissal, they were an erasure. I felt myself disappearing in that room, my contributions reduced to dust. The foundation of trust I had stood on for over a decade had crumbled to nothing beneath my feet. Watching something you built with your own hands, something you nurtured and believed in, be systematically torn apart by incompetence and arrogance, it creates a helplessness that is hard to describe. You feel your own value draining away with every bad decision you're powerless to stop. If you've ever felt that slow motion collapse, hit that subscribe button. What comes next is how you turn that helplessness into unshakable strength. After the party, a cold clarity settled over me. The grief and shock solidified into a hard, focused resolve. I could no longer save Right Solutions. Arthur and Chloe were determined to drive it off a cliff. My only choice was whether I would be in the passenger seat when it happened. The final descent was swift and brutal. The Riverside Project, a multi-story residential build, became the epicenter of the disaster. Chloe, in her infinite wisdom, decided to change the material specs for a key structural component, insisting the cheaper alternative was just as good. My most trusted foreman, Rico, a man with the build of a linebacker and the heart of a teacher, came to me, his face etched with worry. "Marcus, these changes don't meet code," he said, showing me the documents. I tried to tell her, but she said I wasn't qualified to question her decisions. I confronted Chloe, but it was useless. She accused us of being afraid of innovation. A week later, the city inspector red-tagged the site. The work was shut down. The cost of corrections would wipe out any profit and delay the project by months. The news spread through the industry like wildfire. Meanwhile, the office was becoming a ghost town. The employees I had hired and trained, the people who shared my belief in doing quality work, began to resign. One by one, they stopped by my small, windowless office, their eyes downcast to tell me they were leaving. Rebecca, our sharpest project coordinator, was the last to go. "Marcus, morale is dead," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "People don't trust Tommy. They don't think you can stop him. This place, it's not what it used to be." Her words were the final confirmation. The soul of the company was gone. The breaking point, the moment that severed the last tie, was a meeting with Adrian Voss, our most important client. He had hired us specifically because of my reputation. "Marcus," Voss said, his sharp eyes fixed on me, "I hired Right Solutions because of you. Your timelines are realistic. Your work is quality. But now I'm being told this project can be done 6 weeks faster with a 15% cost reduction. That doesn't sound like you. It sounds like desperation." Before I could speak, Chloe jumped in with her practice pitch about streamlining and modernizing. Voss listened, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he closed his folder and pushed it toward me. "Or you're cutting corners," he said flatly. "And I don't do business with contractors who gamble with my investments. Put this project on hold until you can guarantee me the quality I signed up for." As he walked out, I felt the last thread of my professional life at Right Solutions snap. That night, I finally admitted the truth to Nina. I told her everything: the betrayal, the incompetence, the sinking ship. She listened, her hand covering mine. "We have savings," she said, her voice steady and sure. "We'll be okay. I need my husband back. Our daughter needs her father. You can't pour from an empty cup, Marcus, and you've been empty for a long time." Her faith was the anchor I needed. The next morning, I walked into Arthur's office for the last time. I didn't have a folder of reports. I didn't have anger. I had a quiet, unshakable certainty. I placed my security badge, my keys, and my company phone on his desk. Chloe, predictably, was lurking nearby. "Marcus, what is this?" Arthur asked, confusion and a flicker of fear in his eyes. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm. Chloe snorted from the doorway. "You're really quitting? Over some hurt feelings? You're just a glorified foreman, Marcus. You'll never find another opportunity like this." I looked at her, then at Arthur. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. It was the smile of a free man. "You're right, Chloe," I said softly. "I'll never find another opportunity like this." Thank God. I turned my back on them and walked out of the office, down the hall, and out of the life I had spent 12 years building. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in years I could breathe. Making the choice to walk away from security, from an identity you've held for years, for the sake of your own soul. It's a terrifying leap into the unknown. It requires a faith in yourself that others have tried to destroy. What was the moment that gave you that final push? What did you find on the other side? Tell me in the comments. The first few days of freedom were disorienting. The silence in my house was louder than any construction site. But soon, that silence was filled with a new sound. The scratch of a pencil on paper, the hum of my laptop, the determined conversations that started in my garage. My new headquarters. It smelled of gasoline, sawdust, and pure, unadulterated possibility. My first official act was to file the paperwork for Wright and Associates. The name was a deliberate choice. It wasn't for me, but for my father, a humble carpenter who taught me to measure twice and cut once. A man whose integrity was his greatest tool. It was a promise to honor that legacy. I didn't have to go it alone. Rebecca was the first to join me, walking into my garage-turned office with a box of her project files and a fierce, determined look in her eyes. "You're really doing this," she said, a statement, not a question. "We're doing this," I corrected her, handing her the first set of blueprints for our first real project, the North Star Community Center renovation. It was a project Wright Solutions had priced out of existence, and we were going to do it at cost. Then Rico called. "I heard you're back in business." His voice boomed through the phone. "I'm in, and I brought 3 of my best guys with me. We're done wasting our talent over there." The floodgates opened. Subcontractors I hadn't spoken to in months started calling, eager to work with a company that valued quality again. They had felt the sting of Chloe's disrespect, and they were hungry for the kind of leadership that treated them as partners, not liabilities. We worked out of that garage for months. The days were long, the pay was minimal, but the energy was electric. We were a team, a family, united by a shared belief in doing good work. The community center project was our calling card. We finished it 2 weeks early, under budget, and the local newspaper did a feature on it. The headline read, "Local Dream Team Builds a Home for Hope." It wasn't about us, it was about the work. And that was the point. The call that changed everything came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. It was Thomas Davison, Arthur's biggest and most loyal client. "Marcus," he said, his voice all business, "I've seen the community center. I've heard the stories. Adrian Voss sends his regards. I have a project 10 times the size of anything you did for Arthur. Are you ready?" I looked around my garage at Rebecca, at Rico, at the blueprints taped to the wall. I took a deep breath, the scent of sawdust and ambition filling my lungs. "Yes, Mr. Davison," I said, my voice steady. "We're ready." As Wright and Associates began to soar, Wright Solutions entered its death spiral. The news trickled in through the industry grapevine, each piece of information a sad confirmation of what I already knew. The Riverside project was shut down permanently after failing a third inspection. The costs from lawsuits and penalties were staggering. The bank finally called in their loans. The headline "Wright Solutions Files for Chapter 11" was less a surprise and more an obituary for a dream I had once cherished. Arthur showed up at my new construction site one afternoon. I barely recognized him. The proud, commanding man I had known was gone, replaced by a stooped, gray figure whose eyes were hollow with regret. He found me near the site trailer, the sounds of my thriving project a stark contrast to the silence surrounding his. "Marcus," he began, his voice thick with an accent made heavier by emotion. "I can't watch it die. I built it for 30 years. It's my life." He pleaded with me to come back, to help him rebuild, to teach Chloe what she needed to know. He was asking me to save him from the consequences of his own choices. I looked at him, this broken king of a fallen empire, and I felt a profound sadness, but no anger, no desire for revenge. "You didn't make a mistake, Arthur," I said, my voice even. "You made a choice. You chose family over competence. That was your right as an owner, but it's not my problem to solve." I told him the good ones, the people who cared about the work, had already landed on their feet. They were here with me, building something worth believing in. Shame flickered in his eyes and he nodded slowly, accepting a truth he had been running from. "I thought I was doing what was right for my family," he whispered. "I thought loyalty meant keeping it in the blood." My voice softened, though there was no pity in it. "Loyalty means taking care of the people who build it with you, Arthur. You forgot that, and now it's too late." He stood without another word, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and walked away, leaving behind the man who had once been his greatest asset. As for Chloe, the rumors said she was quietly removed from the sinking ship. Her name became synonymous with failure in our industry. Some said she moved to another state, trying to leverage her tarnished MBA into a consulting job. I didn't care enough to find out. Her silence was proof enough of her defeat. The empire I had built had been handed to someone unworthy, and its fall was as inevitable as my rise. 6 months after the bankruptcy headlines, I stood on the rooftop of our latest project, a gleaming commercial high-rise that was a testament to everything we had become. Wright& Associates was more than a company. It was a standard. We had over $8 million in active contracts, a growing list of elite clients, and most importantly, a culture where competence and integrity were the only currencies that mattered. There was no satisfaction in Arthur's regret or Chloe's disappearance. What I felt was a quiet, unshakable certainty. The foundation I stood on now was stronger than any I had ever poured from concrete, because it was built on the values no one could ever take from me again: respect, trust, and the dignity of good work. That evening, I sat on the back porch with Nina, a glass of scotch in my hand. The air was cool, carrying the faint, sweet scent of fresh-cut lumber from a nearby site. "You've come a long way," she said softly, leaning her head on my shoulder. I let out a quiet laugh, the kind that comes from a place of deep peace. "Arthur taught me one thing," I said, staring out at the fading light. "If you work hard, you'll go places." I raised my glass slightly, not in a toast to revenge or even success, but to the journey itself. "He just didn't realize," I finished, "that sometimes you have to leave to get there." I had taken it all back. Not the clients, not the projects, not the profits. I had taken back my name, my worth, and my future. And this time, I had built it to last. For everyone building their own foundation, your legacy awaits. This story was about rebuilding not just a company, but a man's spirit. If it resonated with you, if you believe in second acts and building things that last, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support is what lets us tell these stories of redemption and hope, and subscribe to our channel for more life-inspiring stories like this.